The subway was crowded that evening, the kind of rush hour where the air felt heavy and every seat was a battle won. People pushed in, heads bent low, earbuds jammed in tight, everyone pretending not to notice the world around them. But one sound pierced through the noise, the wail of a baby. At first it was a soft whimper, but within minutes it grew into full-blown crying, echoing off the tiled walls and making passengers shift uncomfortably. Some rolled their eyes, others sighed impatiently, and a few whispered comments under their breath. At the center of it all sat a young woman in an immaculate suit, her diamond watch glinting under the dim lights, her designer bag perched on her lap. She rocked the baby in her arms desperately, but nothing seemed to calm the child. Sweat formed on her brow, and though she kept whispering soothing words, the baby cried harder, as though the city itself had unsettled him. At the far end of the car, a man in worn jeans and a faded hoodie watched the scene. He had a tired face, the kind that carried more years than it should, and calloused hands that clutched a paper bag with 2 loaves of bread and a carton of milk, the bare minimum he could afford after a long day of double shifts. His name was Daniel, a single father raising his 6-year-old daughter Emma on his own. He knew the sound of that cry all too well. It was the universal language of helplessness. He had been there countless times, rocking Emma through fevers, hunger, or nightmares. He looked at the woman again. Something in her eyes struck him. It wasn't just frustration, it was panic. She looked like someone used to controlling every detail of her life, suddenly helpless before something money couldn't fix. The baby's cries grew louder, and passengers started muttering. One man barked, "Can't you do something?" The woman's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Daniel stood. He hesitated, knowing full well he was just another stranger, worn down by life, who had no place stepping into a millionaire's world. But then he remembered Emma's words that morning. "Daddy, you always know what to do." So, swallowing his nerves, he walked over. "Excuse me," he said softly. The woman looked up, startled by his rough appearance. "May I try?" he asked, nodding toward the baby. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the baby's cries. She looked around at the irritated faces, then at Daniel, unsure whether to trust him. Finally, with trembling hands, she passed the child over. Daniel held the baby against his chest, swaying gently, humming low and steady. It wasn't a song so much as a sound, the kind he used when Emma was small, a deep vibration that mimicked a heartbeat. Slowly, incredibly, the baby's sobs softened, then hiccuped, and finally melted into calm. The subway car grew quiet, and all eyes watched in disbelief as this worn-out stranger soothed what wealth and status could not. The woman's shoulders sagged with relief, tears pooling in her eyes. How did you do that?" she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly, brushing a hand over the baby's tiny back. Sometimes they just need to feel a heartbeat. Reminds them they're not alone. When he handed the baby back, she stared at him as though seeing someone entirely different from the man who had first approached her. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice cracking. As the subway screeched to its next stop, Daniel turned to walk back, but the woman stopped him. The subway screeched to another halt, and Daniel stepped onto the platform with his groceries, not realizing the pair of eyes still following him through the glass window of the train. The woman, Elena Sinclair, a name most of the city would recognize from magazine covers and business headlines, clutched her baby closer, her mind spinning. She had seen plenty of people bow before her wealth, men and women desperate for her approval or afraid of her power. But this man, this stranger in a worn hoodie, had done something no one else could. He gave without asking for anything in return. The train rattled forward, carrying Elena away, but the memory stayed. All night long, as she paced in her penthouse trying to get her baby back to sleep, she thought about that single dad, his calmness, his steady hum, the way he had cradled her son with such natural care. It wasn't something you could buy. She wondered what his story was. Why was a man like that riding the subway with groceries in a paper bag instead of walking into a housekeeper's kitchen stocked with food? She didn't know why it mattered, but it did. Meanwhile, Daniel reached his small apartment in a rundown building where the paint peeled off the walls and the elevator hadn't worked in months. His daughter Emma came running barefoot across the creaky floor, her smile lighting up his tired face. "Daddy, you're home," she said, wrapping her arms around him. He hugged her tightly, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm home." They sat together at the tiny kitchen table, eating bread with butter while Emma told him about her day at school. Daniel listened intently, but part of his mind drifted back to the subway. He wondered if the woman made it home safely, if her baby had finally settled. 2 days later, Daniel was walking Emma to school when a sleek black car slowed to a stop beside them. The back window rolled down, and to his shock, Elena leaned forward, her baby asleep in her arms. She looked oddly nervous for someone who usually commanded boardrooms. "Daniel?" she said softly. "I didn't think I'd find you again." Emma clung to his hand, her wide eyes flicking between her father and the stranger in the expensive car. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "Ma'am, you don't have to thank me again. I was just—" "No," Elena interrupted gently. "I want to. That night, I don't think you realize what you did for me. I've been surrounded by people my whole life, but in that moment, I felt completely alone. Until you stepped in." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Compliments from wealthy strangers weren't part of his daily life. Any parent would have done the same. "Not everyone," she said firmly. Then her gaze softened as it fell on Emma. "And this must be your daughter?" Emma nodded shyly. "I'm Emma." "She's lovely," Elena whispered, her voice betraying a kind of longing. She wanted to say more, but the baby stirred, and she instinctively rocked him back to sleep. Daniel noticed the tenderness in her movement. She wasn't just a millionaire with polished nails and designer suits. She was a mother, figuring things out like everyone else. Elena hesitated, then surprised herself with the words that tumbled out. "Daniel, I'd like to invite you and Emma for lunch. Nothing fancy. Just a thank you. Please." Daniel almost refused. He didn't want charity, and he didn't belong in her world. But Emma's hopeful eyes caught him off guard. She had never been inside anything more elegant than a fast food restaurant. Finally, he nodded. "All right, just lunch." That afternoon, they sat in a sunlit cafe Elena had chosen. Simple, warm, not the kind of grand hall Daniel had expected. Emma chattered happily, and Elena listened as if every word was a treasure. Between bites of sandwiches and laughter at Emma's stories, something remarkable happened. The walls between two worlds began to crumble. Daniel, once convinced he had nothing to offer beyond love and resilience, realized. The autumn air was crisp the next time Elena saw Daniel and Emma. She had insisted on walking them home after lunch, but Daniel declined politely, not wanting her driver to see the cracked walls of his building. Still, Elena found herself restless afterward. The boardroom meetings, the endless contracts, the numbers flashing across screens, all of it seemed hollow compared to the warmth of Emma's laughter and the quiet strength Daniel carried like a shield. She couldn't stop thinking about them. For the first time in years, her world of marble floors and glass walls felt too silent, too empty. She thought about how Daniel had gone back to his life with nothing but groceries in his arms, while she returned to a penthouse filled with luxury but not peace. And it stirred something inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since her husband passed away, the ache of wanting connection. Daniel, on the other hand, tried to push the encounter from his mind. He told himself not to get involved, not to dream of bridges between worlds that could never stand. But Emma wouldn't stop talking about Miss Elena and her baby. "Daddy," she said one night as they washed dishes together. She looked lonely, like she needed a friend. "You always tell me friends matter more than money, right?" Daniel froze at her words. Out of the mouths of children came truths too big to ignore. The following weekend, Elena appeared again, this time at the small park near Daniel's building. She stood under the oak trees with her baby in a stroller, her hair loose instead of polished into a perfect knot, her heels replaced with sneakers. Daniel spotted her as he pushed Emma on the swings, surprise flickering across his face. "You came here?" he asked, approaching cautiously. She smiled, a little sheepish. "I wanted some fresh air, and maybe company." Emma squealed with delight and ran over. "Miss Elena!" she cried, throwing her arms around her leg. Elena laughed, bending to hug her back. For a moment, she looked less like a powerful CEO and more like an ordinary woman grateful for affection. They spent the afternoon together. Emma insisted on teaching Elena's baby how to giggle by making silly faces, and to everyone's amazement, it worked. Elena laughed until tears blurred her vision, and Daniel found himself staring, mesmerized by the way her face softened when she let go of her walls. She wasn't the unreachable millionaire anymore. She was just a mom, laughing in the sunlight. As the shadows grew long, Elena sat beside Daniel on a worn bench. The children played in front of them, Emma holding the baby's hand as if she were a big sister already. Elena turned to Daniel, her voice quiet. "Do you ever feel like you're fighting the world alone?" Daniel glanced at her, startled by the rawness in her tone. He nodded slowly. "Every day, but Emma keeps me going. I work myself to the bone, but when she smiles, it's worth it." Elena bit her lip. "I used to think money could protect me from loneliness. I built walls so high that even I got lost inside. And then, the subway. You reminded me that sometimes the smallest kindness is bigger than any empire." He shifted uncomfortably, unused to such openness. "I'm just doing my best, same as you." She studied him, her eyes glistening. "Maybe, but Daniel, you have something I don't. You have a kind of strength no money can buy." For the first time, Daniel didn't brush it off. He let her words settle in his heart, though he dared not believe what they might mean. Over the next weeks, they met again and again, sometimes by accident, sometimes not. Elena invited them to places Daniel had never dreamed of visiting: an art exhibit, a library with storytelling sessions for children, a cozy cafe tucked away in the city. But she never flaunted her wealth. She learned to order hot chocolate instead of champagne, to sit on picnic blankets instead of velvet chairs, with Emma's innocent chatter bridging every silence.